Good morning, excuse me. I'm just going to continue my series on the 2009 Pearl Springs tournament. Magnus Carlsen is playing white against Veselin Topalov, another former World Championship finalist. I played against Vladimir Kramnik in the famous Toilet Gate match. So Carlsen plays d4. He played e4 in the last game. He plays d4 against Topalov. Toplov plays knight f6, Carlsen plays c4. Pretty standard so far. He plays g6. This is the king's Indian defence. And the idea is to develop the bishop here, get quickly castled, move the knight, and begin a kingside attack with the move f5. Carlsen carries on with his development. The bishop, as advertised for, comes to g7, and Carlsen takes more of the centre with e4. d6, you have to try and compete in the centre. If you just castle, then e5 will crush you. So, and the last knight comes out, and Topalov castles again, as in the game I was looking at earlier today with Fischer. The game with Fischer, which I analysed a few days ago. Castling kingside here it's not bad. It's a good move. It's what I would recommend to beginners and everybody actually. But it does let your opponent know, well, I'm here to be attacked on the king side. Have at it. And Carlsen doesn't have at it. Of course not. Carlsen, one of the great things I like about Carlsen is he doesn't begin an attack until he has improved everything to its maximum. He plays h3. There's 2 points behind h3. It secures the square g4 against the knight and the bishop, which allows the bishop to come to e3 without it being harassed. Also, it supports g4, and since he will be playing a kingside attack, g4 will be a useful move. Maybe looks a bit wrong to be playing the knight to a6, but the pawn will eventually be coming to c5, and then it will be possible for the knight to come to c7, maybe pawn to a6, maybe rook to b8, maybe bishop to c7, and then a b5 push. So it is an unusual but sensible enough placement for the knight. The bishop comes, as advertised, for to e3. And he strikes with e5, not c5. Both are possible. And both usually meet the same response, which is d5. Plays to c6 to attack the pawn, also to give the knight this square so that he's got another attacker on the pawn. g4. So he's not hesitating with his kingside attack. Often you see that black is going to attack on the king side, on the queen side, even although the king isn't there. Often with these opposite sides castling games, opposite sides attacking games, it's throwing the first punch that is really the deciding factor. So neither of them are hesitating with their launching their attacks on opposite sides of the board. So Topalov attacks the pawn on e4 for the second time. Carlsen can't let that fall. There's only one move, knight to e2, d2 even to defend. Pawn comes to a5, pinching a little bit more space, and the pawn stops here. It doesn't look like, obviously, white can't castle on the king side when it's so open, but it doesn't really look like he can castle on the queen side now. Is the king going to be left in the middle? We'll see. The knight reroutes, maybe coming to b6, maybe just coming out of the way so that the f7 pawn can be pushed to f5. The rook comes to g1, so that if the pawn is pushed, takes, this bishop is pinned. Discourages him from playing f5 at the minute. a4, a great move, restrains both of these two pawns and makes that square a hole. Must be impossible to castle queenside, no. Queen comes to c2. Knight comes to b6, attacking the c4 pawn. And white castles queenside. Doesn't look possible, but he gets away with it. He knows he's got a fine judgment of what a position can tolerate. So the king goes to b1, a safer square. And the pawn is taken on d5. And it's recaptured. Puts the queen on an open file, actually. You know, got to be thinking already rook to c8 and some knight move might be dangerous for Carlsen here. And the rook comes right enough to c8, and the bishop comes to b5, and it gets taken, and the knight takes, and now isn't he open to a discovery? But he doesn't really have such a good discovery at the minute. So he comes to d7 so that he can back up the rook with another rook. And so Carlsen comes back to c3 so that the knight move is no longer a discovery on the king. Bishop comes to f6, maybe looking to come here. Carlsen says no. Attacks the bishop and takes up a bit more space on the king's side. Defends the pawn immediately, but it has left weak this diagonal. That will have to be defended throughout the rest of the game. Another rearrangement, the knight is going to come to c7 and then to possibly d8, possibly g7. And also it frees this pawn. So the bishop is taken, the knight is taken, and the bishop's taken by the rook. But this drops a pawn. Carlsen judges correctly that he can get away with that pawn. And the queen comes to c8 to double up on the knight. And the knight attacks the queen. Great, the queen opened up by moving the rook. Not just defending the knight, but he's opening up the d1 square for his queen. An ideal square to come possibly here or here to transfer his queen to the other side of the board. And he comes to h3. f3. Maybe you're thinking that leaves a pawn hanging. That's a dangerous pawn to take. Very dangerous. And Topalov thinks better of taking that pawn. And the queen comes to d3 and he's nicely transferred then. Queen to a good square. King comes to g7. Probably safer there. And it makes it possibly more possible to play one of these pawns. And also it opens up the h8 square for the rook. So he's getting ready to double his rooks here. Pawn comes to f6 and the pawn gets taken. The rook takes, so that he's threatening this pawn, and when he moves, this pawn will be hanging. But he moves this pawn in advance because this pawn is pinned. The pawn on f2 gets taken, but he just takes back on g6. He's got to push the pawn. If he takes on h6, queen here is going to be a frightening move for Topalov. Great move. Knight comes to d1 to attack the rook. And he takes the rook on c2. But Carlsen has a choice. And he takes the rook on f2, so he's still threatening the rook on c2, and that rook has to now retreat. And now he comes to g4 with the knight, defended by the queen, and it also keeps the queen out of this square. So helps to damp down white's attacking chances. Bishop comes to g5, and the knight comes to f3 to attack the bishop. He's very happy to swap that off, and the knight comes and he swaps it off. And the queen comes to a4, and he takes the pawn, threatening check here. Queen takes pawn and says check, and the king goes to a1. And now the rook cuts off the queen from the e7 square. But Carlsen very nicely decides this with rook c1. Can't be prevented from playing rook to c7 check. And yeah, that's going to be fatal for Topalov. Rook to c7 check. Wherever the king goes, g7 will come. You know, mating plans are easily developed here. Again, I'm not going to explain these mating plans for you. It's your responsibility to find these mating plans for yourself. Because the idea is that you learn something about chess by watching my wittering about the game. Yeah, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Thanks for today. Bye.